We were talking about how the etymology of words kind of gives an insight into human society. Well, the synthesis.
For example,
Yeah, is that right?
I know two
No,
interesting ones.
it's just that if you take apart, language. What I'm trying to say is, you perceive the world. Language is this sort of framework, this structure, in which your grasp of the world around you is contained. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
to deepen your knowledge of the language, to realize that your language is not something that's absolute, that has always been that way for no particular reason, but it sort of evolved over years, and the words that you use, and you people use words without really thinking about the meaning, and they
like democracy.
they actually, and they actually sometimes it's quite. I think Bertrand Russell said this in philosophy. What was it called?
Oh, can I just ask Ollie about inauguration? Okay, there's the example of the word inauguration. So Ollie
inauguration means literally means the interpretation of birds for fortune telling.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Really? So
yes, because that used to be a very important part of Roman culture. That whenever there's a major event about to happen, they used to basically interpret the behavior of birds to tell. For example, before battles, they used to have these sacred chickens, and they used to give them food. And if the chickens ate, then the battle would be won, and if the chickens didn't, then
they wouldn't
be
go
lost.
Oh, right.
They did it, when you threw the food, and definitely don't hunt the battle.
Yes.
So,
another yes. I don't know how you can explain that, but I suppose with inauguration.
No, so
I suppose you're in a way you're inaugurating a battle by trying to tell how it's going to come out.
Well, no, I think the point I'm making is just you peel away the layers around these words, and get to the deeper meaning. Yes, yeah. And you can gain understanding of the evolution of human culture that way. It's not obvious, especially to the uneducated man. It's not as though you study a bit of Latin, learn that inauguration's got something to do with birds, therefore your knowledge of human culture and consequently yourself is sort of immediately enriched. It requires imagination and some sort of insight to really grasp why this is important.
I know. Another word.
Yeah, go on.
Another interesting word is the word candidate, which actually means just shining white.
Really?
Bright.
Candid.
Yes.
What's the Latin?
Candidus, which is just kind of very bright white.
Yes, that's right.
And the reason why they were called that is because political candidates in elections in Rome always wore really bright white togas.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that people could distinguish them.
Yeah. As I say, it does require imagination, because your average Joe is going to think,
well, so what?
So what?
Exactly.
So what? And yes. But I mean, it's just your picture of the world, because we are the world. If you like, the world's a kind of concept, and it's created in our heads through language. Yes. And our concept is of that particular, our understanding of that particular concept is deepened. Yes, so it is valuable. Yeah, but as I say, I've already said, the study of classics, I think, is always going to be. It's desirable that it remains the pursuit of an educated elite. Yeah, which means that maybe some of the advantages will be quite difficult to explain to people who are not very quick to understand things. But I maintain that doesn't really matter. It's not desirable. I don't believe in this modern idea that, especially this sort of internet age idea, that no concept or idea is acceptable unless it can be explained to the least intelligent person in society in less than a minute or something. The fact that it's difficult to understand perhaps doesn't mean that it's incorrect.
But and then you're saying, so with the case of people who have got disconnected from their culture.
Yeah, because I gave the case of
Turkey, and then also. Well, maybe not go in too much detail about the Caribbean. People of Africa.
Turkey is a good case, and you'd have to ask a Turk about this, but it's just some.
The Turkish moment tourist said something about it.
There we go.
He said that they checked it off, but if they hadn't, he would have been able to read the Quran.
well, not necessarily, because we were talking about Ottoman Turkish.
No, but they got rid of Arabic.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So what happened?
Well, the point is, in the 20s, possibly 1928, around that time, there's a big language reform of Turkish language, and also they changed the alphabet. They got rid of the Arabic alphabet, which apparently was never that well suited to Turkish anyway, and they introduced the Latin alphabet. Yeah. And then which
Meaning the one that we use.
yeah, it's not
Yeah.
the same one, but it's similar to
Similar.
to the Romanian ones the Romanians use. But I would say,
Mm.
which means that now and since then, Turks are unable to read Ottoman literature. Yeah,
Which is the ancient
well,
literature.
not ancient.
Oh, not
it's
even
up until
ancient.
1918.
Oh, right.
So all the literature written in Turkish. Up until all the written Turkish up until 1920s is something they can't read. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other. So has it kind of affected them?
I don't know. You'd have to ask a Turk that. I don't know enough about Turkey, but yeah, I think it would have done. But the question is how. Yes.
All right. And could you just say about the Chinese, because your experience with China? There is an exam they do. You were saying this morning. The got was
That's just the the state examination.
state
What's it
exam for
called?
who?
Gaokao.
Gaoka. And you said that they need to know a.
Well, I remember asking my students what was in this exam, and they mentioned they went through it in detail. But they did mention there was a section they did in classical Chinese. All I had to do, I think, was read text, short, possibly even short texts in classical Chinese. I think they had to translate them, or at least render the meaning into modern standard Chinese. But they needed to have enough knowledge. They didn't require a very deep knowledge of it, but they needed to have some knowledge of it. So it kept it alive. But the Chinese, although classical Chinese is a difficult language, it's sort of easy for the Chinese person because it's honestly
Not so different.
Not so different from standard Chinese. So it's a bit like probably ancient Greek to a modern Greek. Something like that.
Yeah, but I was thinking that in England we don't have any. Nobody really knows Old English, do they? Not really.
Only scholars, as far as I know. I think there is an Old English course at Oxford or Cambridge University.
Called
Asnak.
Asnak.
Yeah, there is. It's only
Anglo-Saxon Norse.
Yeah.
Anglo-Saxon.
Norse and Celtic.
Yeah, but it's not
Norse and
popular.
Celtic.
I think it's not popular. I know for one reason is I don't know how much written in sort of Old English or to what extent it's a standardized language. Also, you're talking about the time when probably the culture. Yeah, around about if we're talking about sort of 1,000 years ago, or the end of the first millennium, we're talking about a time when the culture was the world was probably in a way more civilized. The Western world was a more civilized and unified and culturally vibrant place. 1,000 years before. So the obvious languages to learn are Latin. I don't know how many texts there are in Old English.
Oh right.
Beowulf and stuff like that. I don't know, but I think the obvious place to start is also the other thing is, and this is what Schopenhauer does make in his essay on the study of Latin. Studying things like ancient English or Frankish or something, or
what's Frankish?
Well, whatever language of the Franks or the sort of language, or let me see what else, Old German, whatever. You're talking about provincial. Yeah, what Schopenhauer in his essay was these are sort of provincial languages that split away, they developed after the decline of Latin as a unifying language. This is his point. I think this is true. Latin was a unifying language for the whole of the western part of Europe. Yeah.
So it'd be a bit like English.
Yeah, Latin was not a provincial, and the literature of Latin is not a provincial literature. It's a sort of.
Whereas Old English maybe was.
Well, because it's just something that's confined to the British Isles. All the other languages, Celtic languages like Welsh and so on. So we're not talking about languages that are known by large numbers of people. That are the languages of administration. So I don't know, Ollie. Would you say is this being superficial? But Greek is a language of philosophy and maybe to some extent history, but Latin is sort of language of administration to some degree, isn't it?
Perhaps.
Well, that's not really answering the question.
I know, but there's plenty of Latin used in science and philosophy.
Science and
philosophy. Also plenty of Latin literature, Latin lyric poetry and so on. But I've heard it said that Latin is ultimately Latin,
Administrative.
language of the Roman Empire and the medieval church. So it's a Latin language of laws and sort of governance. Yeah? But
Mainly.
Greek is okay. Latin, Greek is the language.
Oh, it's getting a bit long. Can I just say one thing? Do you think if you the meaning of education in Latin? Just say what it means. It means Ola, you say.
It comes from educo, which means I lead out.
A lead out. So it's kind of bringing out knowledge.
In this case.
In this case, bring out knowledge, isn't it?
Well, bring out, yes.
Something.
From inside.
Yeah, which is the opposite of what actually happens, which people get stuffed with.
Yeah, but I don't think that's to be seen as a bad, automatically a sort of dirty business. Yeah, because you've got to be given the tools with which you bring these things out. Yeah, so when you're learning Latin, I don't think anyone can seriously teach people Latin without drilling them with grammar and vocabulary and so on. And only you have these Greek and Latin tests all the time, don't you? No substitute.
No substitute.
I think the point is, but maybe good educational practice would be to make sure the pupils, maybe not the youngest pupils, but reasonably mature pupils, do not lose sight of the need for this and the fact that the reason for learning Latin. So they realise that being drilled with these Latin tests is not an end in itself. It's just a stepping stone onto the next stage. Yeah? When I was a child learning Latin in cathedral school, you lose sight of that. So Latin is just this sort of horrible thing where you've got to sort of learn these tests for no particular reason, and then whatever. That's why a lot of people will. Mention that we'll talk about it negatively. Like Dad, I mentioned Latin. Dad makes that sounds boring sort of reaction. Dad hasn't got over probably learning Latin in the 1930s or 40s, no doubt being the bottom of the class, and not being able to remember a single thing. And the teacher said, "Be careful, Kenny. Be careful. Be very careful." Probably getting the stick again. Kenny, you're not being careful enough.
But anyway, can I finish with the So if you think the study of classics, basically you kind of knowing about yourself, which is if your real education should teach you about where you came from. This is why we go for meditation. We want to know who we are.
We're getting quite abstract here, but I suppose you could argue that all education ultimately, or good education, would end or develop in that way. Yes, but even so, I suppose they're definitely classics because it's you gain knowledge of human culture and human being, consequently human beings. Yes, now we're just human beings, therefore gaining knowledge of human beings in general terms, or just in terms of specific human beings in specific civilisations and epochs, we do gain knowledge of ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes.